Hello, everybody. You know, it's raining and thundering here in Sarasota, Florida, and I thought, what a perfect time to make a campfire. And as these campfires are not meant to be, hey, you know, here's a video to show you where this button is, or here's a video to show you how this latest feature is in this software package or anything. There's plenty of those out there. These campfires are more in terms of how to handle projects from start to finish, workflow, pipelines, general advice, stuff like that, for both visual effects, animation, and motion design. There seems to be a lot of motion designers who are reaching out to me, watching the videos, commenting on things, and I love that. I welcome that. I spent a lot of time in motion design. And speaking of that, I thought I'd share with you, not so much a software pipeline tutorial or anything like that right now, but what I have done in the past is my proven, I think, easy 10-step production process to get you through most projects. Now, these projects could be very well motion design projects, animation shots, even visual effects shots where you have to pretty much ideate from start to finish. The steps involved, the pitfalls, how to handle clients, stuff like that. I throw that in here into this campfire. It's the easy 10-step production process by me. If you have a better process, I would love to hear it. Please let me know, because as we're all artists, we can all level each other up together, learn from each other. And that's what I want this campfire and all these campfires and YouTube channels to be about, is artistic, communal back and forth. My 10-step process is a great tool to also break down deadlines, milestones, without skipping valuable phases of production. And also talk a little bit about how clients react to these phases as well, because that's a lot of it is, you know, what are you showing the client? When are you showing the client something? And what can you expect to get back oftentimes? So let's just pretend we have any kind of project. Maybe it's a shot where we have a spaceship flying through space, which is something I kind of plan on doing here in a new podcast coming up. Maybe a space battle or something, and maybe it's just going to be used for a commercial. Maybe there's even a logo reveal at the end. Who knows? Doesn't really matter. But the very first thing I like to do is step one. I call it competitive analysis. And the reason why I do competitive analysis is because you don't know how good or where the bar is. You don't know who to beat if you don't know what the competition is doing. Right? Production is always smoother when there is dedicated and focused pre-production time allotted to invest in that stage. And no one has inherent knowledge of every single client or industry or topic, right? So before you even begin thinking about, you know, your specific project design solutions or how you're going to tackle it, or even what software you're going to use, it's a great idea to see what's already out there, who your competition is. What has come before you? This establishes valuable knowledge of genre conventions, which is great for cinema, episodic television, historical styles. This is the stage where you do your homework. You know, if somebody says, we want this to be, you know, kind of like in the, maybe in the 1930s kind of a feel. Maybe you're doing like a railroad shot or a sci-fi train but it's set in the 30s. What does that mean? You want to do your homework. You want to know that historical precedents and movements of Art Nouveau and Art Deco and streamlined 40s style and all that kind of look. You want to permeate that into your work. So to be a great artist, you almost have to be a great historian, a visual historian. So you can get that in visual information and put it into your own work. And you could be a visual historian just watching movies, really. If you've seen a ton of Westerns, you now know what a town in the Old West looks like, right? There's obviously not a lot of chrome and rivets, but there is an awful lot of wood and weathering and stuff. So, you know, watching movies and playing really good games from people who have done their homework is you doing your homework. So that's super valuable. So historical styles and aesthetics and current trends in the industry. That's super important. You don't want to create something that looked awesome 2 years ago because it was a plugin that just came out and everybody used it. And now we're all so sick of it, right? But all of a sudden you just discovered it and you're going to use it and everyone's going to be like, oh, there's that plugin, right? And you really kind of want to stay away from trendy plugins. You really want to make those your own anyway. Don't ever use anything out of the box that just is, you know, set to the default values. That's always a big no-no, right? I just spilled some coffee on myself. That's okay. So what is in step two? Step two is the style contact sheet. Okay, this is also super important. Now, keep in mind right now, I haven't put pixel to screen or paper to pen yet. I'm still doing my homework. What is a style contact sheet? For me, in step 2, you collect all your research data, all your ideas and pictures, and you composite them into an easily viewable plate of images and notes. And it just doesn't have to be one. It could be many. And it could be, one per perhaps asset or environment. Maybe you have a contact sheet for the spaceship, contact sheet for the environment, whatever. And it doesn't have to be like, hey, I'm creating a spaceship. What's it going to look like? It could be how light is affecting a texture. It could be a really cool, even letter form that gave you an idea that springboarded you into another direction, right? So this contact sheet I make is not composed of images that I analyzed in the competitive analysis phase. Don't use for inspiration what other people have already done, because then you're basically making a copy of a copy, okay? Because they already did their own homework. So you use original sources and you don't copy, a solution that's done by somebody else. So this is a collection of ideas that pertain to your original design solutions and where you got that inspiration from. So these images can include references of light and shadow, materials and shaders, typographic elements that often, shows up in commercial work or something. Color schemes for sure, line and space, sound design, and a lot more. There's a lot more out there. Whatever triggers a good idea. And you always, if you're trying to think of, say, a dragon, don't go look at pictures of dragons, right? Because you're just going to make a copy of another dragon. Go look at nature, and maybe you get an idea from a dragon, from a crazy insect, or a dinosaur, or who knows what it could be, or even a weird looking robot, or whatever, or a funny looking rock. Those are more in terms of original ideas on how to infuse originality into your work by going to original sources, okay? So each design solution that you come up with should have its own corresponding style contact sheet, and it's referred back to constantly throughout the whole project. All right, now step 3 is probably the most important step, and anybody that's been in my classes, anybody that knows me, you know how I feel about storyboards. Storyboards are like, Hitchcock felt the same way. And I am by no means saying, hey, me and Hitchcock are, thinking the same long lines. No, not at all. He's a master of cinema, and I'm just trying to, come up with some good ideas here and there. But storyboards are everything. Your clients won't like them, okay, unless they're drawn by, Michelangelo or something, because they just want to see the finished artwork as fast as possible. They're there really to serve you and to help you. And if you get a client that responds well to storyboards, that's great. Most of them will not. Most of them will ignore the storyboard phase and make changes when you're well into production, like 99% done with your animated shot. That's when they'll start mixing things up. Like, hey, can the dragon or the robot or the environment kind of be 180 degrees the other direction? How would that look? And those are the clients that think that you can just change an animation or visual effect shot like it's a Word document. I could just rip out that line and put a new line in, and there you go, and it looks totally different. Where it's more of a painting where you're building upon layers and layers of things, and changing one thing 10 layers back has to change everything going forward. That aside, storyboard the major action in step 3. Accomplished drawing skills are not required to create effective thumbnails. I am not a superb illustrator by any stretch of imagination, but I can draw well enough to get an idea down, and that's all you need to do, okay? Just get an idea down where somebody else understands it without you having to stand over their shoulder and say, this is what I was thinking and that's what I was thinking. If someone could read your storyboard without you being there and understand what you're doing, that's a great storyboard. That's all you need. You need to have sufficient ability to quickly convey concepts to others, as well as further explore the possible design solution yourself. So at this stage, you're paying focused attention to the camera, okay? Because the frame is the camera. And I see people sometimes, they say, okay, we know the end result's going to be on television. Maybe it's a 16 by 9 frame. Why is your storyboard in a square? Right? A good graphic designer or cinematographer or visual effects artist knows to work with the frame. So the frame is everything. So when we're looking at framing, the aspect ratio has to be exactly the same as the output aspect ratio of the final video or animation or whatever the case may be. Okay. It's not just a napkin sketch at this stage. Okay. So camera angles, which allow you to see what do I have to build? All I see is the corner of this building in one shot, so I'm just going to build the corner of that building. I'm not going to build the whole asset. It's just going to take you 10 times as long to build the whole thing when all you nearly need is that corner. And that's important because when storyboards are approved, that gives you the ammunition to justify you only building that corner of that building that appears in that shot. Okay, so it only allows you to see what assets are absolutely needed. So now we're speeding up our production. How you can build them in the most effective manner, right? You don't need sides and backs often to a whole lot of things, depending on what the camera is doing. And how the visual cinematic language techniques will convey the most effective message to the viewer. And when I say message, that doesn't mean I'm selling M&Ms. That means on a visual effects shot, it means, hey, look at that thing in the corner. That's the message. I want you to know, that Indy Jones is stealing the sacred stone. Look at the stone. Don't look at the big, thuggy guard statue that's cool, but it's in the background. So it should be lit and composed and handled in a separate way because the message is Indiana Jones and the sacred stones, right? So you should be illustrating rough moving cameras. Include camera movement notes. Include notes or any voiceover that might be going on or any dialogue. Include the timing of these things and I talk it out. I'll go through and I'll say, well, here's what I'm doing for the storyboard. I need to say these 2 lines. So I'll say those 2 lines and I'll time it and then I'll put that timing in there and it's giving you a rough estimation of how long that shot's going to be. All right. So you're illustrating rough moving cameras as well as directional action, framing, all that good stuff. You try and get a sign off on storyboards. Most of the time a client will just say, yeah, looks great, go. Okay. And that's usually when that means you're going to have to change something later on when it's going to be harder to do, it's going to take longer to do, and it's going to be more frustrating to do at that point. Can you help it? Oftentimes, no, because the client's writing the check, right? So you do what they want you to do. But if you can catch it at this stage, it's so much easier to just change a tiny little scribble than it is to change a shot that took 10, 20, 50 hours to do. Step number 4 for me, I then build all the major assets, right? So assets should be built in the most effective ways in regard to speed, level of detail, and proximity to the camera. Those 3 things, bread and butter, for what an asset looks like, whether it's heroed out or whether it's a background element that's not going to get a whole lot of love in close-ups, right? So we're talking about speed, level of detail, proximity to the camera. When we say hero elements for the new students out there, those elements are sometimes they're said, let's hero this out. That means that you give so much more love and attention and time to the detail of those elements because it's really close to the camera, right? So if you have 5 trees and one tree is really close to the camera, the other trees can be fairly low res. That tree that's close to the camera better be heroed out. That's your hero tree because it's just got a ton of detail on it and it's going to hold up. It's not going to look really bad that close to the camera, right? Assets that are not limited to 3D models like backgrounds, both CG and filmed, principal photography, illustrations, practicals, rough dynamic effects. That's the assets that we're building here. Now, rough models and assets are really useful to quickly begin framing in the animatics without getting bogged down in detail and texture and rigging and animation. Most of them aren't animated at all. Maybe it's just like somebody hopping across the screen instead of a cool walk cycle, right? So, your team and your client should know this is rough assets. This is rough animation. This is very major assets are just being built here. Textures and lighting, not included at this stage at all. But maybe some basic color swatches can be useful. This is the stage where I also tell a lot of my students, never go 3D until you have to. And I'll include a little clip from one of my classes that I talk about. I think it's a digital compositing, intro to digital compositing class, where I say, when you're building things out for a VFX shot, you never go 3D until you have to. So then the question is, well, Dante, how do I know when I have to do it? Well, when you put it in the shot, and you're going to see there's anything in a moving camera shot is going to be basically distorted, and I mean that in a good way, distorted 2 separate ways, with parallax distortion or with perspective distortion. And that's what I'm going to talk about in that clip that I'm probably going to seed into this Campfire real quick, which means, never, one of my golden rules, never go 3D until you have to. It saves you a ton of time and you can't tell the difference in the end result. All right, step 5, camera animatics, right? And this is when you're actually saying, this is the camera that is going to be finalized for the move. We use that term loosely, finalized, right? By the way, I learned real early in the VFX world, you never put the word final in any file name, because you end up with final, really final, version 2 final. Don't ever use the word final. But anyway, so this stage is where I'm trying to lock down the camera animatics, the animated camera. So whether you're incorporating solely 2D or 3D elements, you got to pay strict attention to the cameras. Where are you getting the camera information? From the storyboards, of course, right? You try and match the storyboards exactly. You know, I always kind of go back to that story that Hitchcock never looked through the lens, or very infrequently looked through the lens of a camera when he was making all his movies, because he knew the storyboard was perfect, and he trusts the cinematographer to follow what's on the page. So he doesn't have to look through the thing. It's lined up already. He has trust in the people that worked for him, right? So you pay strict attention to the cameras. The term camera is kind of used interchangeably with the framing of graphic design elements, the frame, you know, and even non-traditional projects like holograms must still focus the viewer on what to see and what not to see. You know, what's the message of the shot? What's the meaning of the shot? What's someone supposed to take away? So, you know, even though sometimes we may not be using a traditional camera frame or whatever, you know, this stage is still pretty important. The industry has moved really rapidly from 2D boardmatics to 3D animatics. And that includes low-resolution assets, bare-bones animation, still at this stage. In feature animation, this is when it's called layout. Camera angles and movement is usually and hopefully locked down here. So the emphasis is on timing, narrative, message readability, comprehension. You know, once that camera is locked down, you're oftentimes going to export that camera, you know, to its own file and then reference that camera on a project. So, you know, on a movie, I may have, you know, if it's a sequence, every shot has its own camera that's separate, and then I reference it in so I don't have to go through loading up lots of big Maya scenes or something and changing the camera or anything like that. Somebody else can actually move the camera and it's updated automatically. We'll talk about references another time. But in feature animation, it's called layout. Camera angles and movement is hopefully locked down here. This stage also solidifies what you need to build and at what level of detail. Shots are identified at this stage, and every shot is numbered, and you do not, under any circumstances, ever change a shot number once it's assigned. It doesn't matter if you're on a commercial with 3 shots or a major motion picture with 1,000 shots. Do not reuse shot numbers. It is its own thing that will live and die with that shot, and if that shot is cut, that number is cut. Right? And that's super, super important when you're trying to communicate effectively with the editing team. So shots are identified, they're ordered, they're incorporated into the project timeline. I'll show you, I wrote some custom software for independent visual effects production, and I'll show you guys that on another Campfire. And that really saves me a ton of time because it keeps me super, super organized. Because I just wasn't finding anything that I liked out there, and I just didn't want to deal with like 1,000 spreadsheets and crap like that, and like Google Drives and Cloud Drives. So I'll show you what I built in a little while, maybe in another Campfire sometime. Scratch audio is often included in this point right here, and preliminary edits are heavily influenced, you know, by this. So don't wait until step 9 to consider your audio choices. And this is really where a big difference between visual effects and motion design kind of separate. Because in motion design, you very often have to edit and animate to the music. So you better pick out the music now. Don't wait until the 11th hour to pick out music that fits, because your animation is always going to be way off because you want to animate to the beats and to the changes and the change-ups in the audio. So for like motion design projects or commercial work or a commercial or even a corporate animation or something, you're going to animate and you're going to edit to those timing beats and, you know, and cuts and stuff like that. So don't wait until the end to get audio. Get it now and animate to that. And better get approval on that audio too, because if you love that song or whatever it is and the client hates it and you animated to it, you animated all that for nothing, right? As far as visual effects, it's not going to be your role to mess around with sound and music, so you can just kind of ignore that for now, and that's somebody else's problem.